All right, so this is a video that was long overdue. It's something I've wanted to do, and with the dead period right now and stuff like that in Destiny, I wanted to talk about that and a little bit of a highlight what this video is going to be about. Maybe you can tell with the thumbnail title. I don't really know how I'm labeling this or creating a thumbnail. Crafting is an issue right now in Destiny for me, and it's something that has been talked about in the past. I have made a video on this in the past, but I really want to get more into detail and break it down a little bit more because this is something that needs to be addressed. And with the changing of guard when it comes to Joe Blackburn as game director to something green as the next game director, I apologize for not knowing your entire name. I'm learning. Yeah, you're new, for at least in my eyes, as game director. There is something I want to be done for crafting that hopefully can better the game itself, because if this issue persists, then we have some serious issues that are really never going to feel like they have changed. So for one, I need Bungie to admit that crafting needs fixing. The reason why I need them to admit it is because if they don't and they're quiet about it, then they don't really view it as an issue, and it doesn't bring me any confidence that they're going to be making steps towards addressing the issue. If they at least talk about it, then at least in the back of my mind, I know that they're making steps and making plans to address this issue. But right now, Bungie hasn't admitted anything about crafting. They just admitted and talked about how, you know, the resource economy at one point with crafting was too convoluted, too complicated, and had too many obstacles. And now that those obstacles are now gone, yeah, we're seeing the full repercussions of what crafting can do. And before we continue, I want to mention this. A system like crafting is needed, but we also have to look at what harm has it done to the game. Now, before we get into any details, it's pretty easy to say that, hey, when it comes to endgame activities like raid, crafting has really affected the replayability of those endgame contents. That's kind of a pivotal foundation of the Destiny experience. If you have less people playing your endgame content, more often than not, you have less people playing your game. And with crafting, you kind of eliminate that loot chase, that RNG love and thrill. And yes, I played Destiny 1. I understand that RNG in Destiny 1 was an experience, and an experience we didn't enjoy entirely. But if we recall, if you guys were playing that, there was a found love for that reward that you finally got that god roll you so dreamed of. That was a thing, and it made a memorable experience. And I feel like crafting at least has took away a lot of that in activities we usually see that. Before we jump into the kind of breaking down of the issues, I want Bungie to kind of lay out the original goal of crafting. Remind us what the purpose here was, and how they implemented this crafting system hasn't really worked out as they planned, or they didn't see some of these underlying issues that are presented. I want to know what the purpose here was, because if we understand the original goal, then it creates an easy avenue to pivot and address these issues. Now, I do think, since I mentioned issues, let's get a little bit more into detail about some of the major issues I have with crafting right now and how it's implemented in the game and what it does for the whole game in itself. For one, it's really important, I mentioned it before, end game content is losing value faster now with crafting than it did previously. Now, if you recall Destiny 1's time, and I don't think this is a good representation of showing you the value of RNG because it has its own flaws. In D1, when Vault of Glass first came out, acquiring those god rolls and those weapons and armor pieces from Vault of Glass were the only way at the time to reach that massive power level of 30. And as more raids were introduced, obviously new armor sets represented different points of pinnacle completion. Now, is that what I want? No, but as you can tell, endgame content has had massive value to the ecosystem of Destiny 2, whether it's PvE or PvP, and the fact that for PvE we're getting some of the most valuable weapons crafted, we're losing value in that content faster. Before, it was until the next raid came out, or at least the next year came out, when there was a brand new power cap, the power of those weapons lost value. I still don't think that's healthy, but as you could tell, the value was at a longer lasting level than it is now. For the most part, trying to run Root of Nightmares if it isn't pinnacle is kind of hard to do if you don't have a squad of 6. And thank God for, you know, Fire Team Finder and all these LFG discords and all that stuff. But again, finding that group as of now at the end of the year, or at least the planned year before the delay, is becoming harder. Same with Valor Disciple, same with all the older raids that are still in the game. If you guys already have those crafted weapons and the exotic, then playing those is meaningless, and that issue is now something that is becoming a faster problem that crafting isn't doing anything to address. Now, this one may be a little bit controversial, but in my opinion, seasonal weapons being craftable as a whole makes the endpoint of a season more clear than ever. And usually the endpoint of a season is tied to the narrative, but I'll be honest, if you get all the loot as fast as possible and you craft all the seasonal weapons, then what the hell are you playing the seasonal activities for? I do think Season of the Wish has introduced a better seasonal activity of value with the coil and the pinnacle rewards offering ascendant shards and ascendant alloy, but besides that, the game in itself hasn't really brought much value besides the loot that you earn per season or per expansion or per raid or per activity. And with crafting being a thing and tied to seasonal weapons, you just kind of get all the weapons. Like, I've been doing that usually in the first 4 to 5 weeks, getting all the seasonal weapons crafted, and then like the value of playing the season is now lost, and that's not healthy, that's not good, and it obviously causes tons of problems if you're wanting players to continually sign in, play the game, have a good time, and chase that loot. So maybe everyone doesn't feel the same about that, and I'll definitely bring solutions in the next part. But yeah, seasonal weapons being craftable definitely makes the endpoint more clear for a season than just the narrative. And I guess you could say the last issue here that I do think is a major one that has plagued the PvE sandbox for some time, and even the PvP sandbox, is crafting weapons, at least at this rate that we have, makes it hard to balance the sandbox when the best weapons are becoming easier to obtain than ever before. Yeah, it is hard, right? And it's kind of the reason why they did the Destiny content vault and sunsetting weapons, was to make it so they didn't have to do these massive changes and overhauls to the weapons themselves. And I don't like sunsetting weapons, but we can admit to a certain extent that it did address some massive issues we had with pinnacle weapons. And now you could still use pinnacle weapons in non-power cap activities, and those activities are becoming more common than ever before, but they've also addressed those old pinnacle weapon issues too. But balancing a sandbox is really important in a game like Destiny, whether it's the PvE sandbox, whether it's the PvP sandbox. For example, in PvE right now, you are kind of sold on a few archetypes, whether that's an SMG, whether that's a hand cannon now with the buff, yada yada yada. There's these set loadouts that kind of haven't changed since crafting weapons have been a thing, because they're just so damn powerful. And again, they're becoming more easy to obtain than ever before. And maybe I am okay with it being half easier than it was before, but at the same time, we're seeing the repercussions of this really affect the ecosystem and the desire to play Destiny sometimes. And I do think we undersell crafting when it comes to as an issue to the game. Like I said, I do think it's a necessity to have in the game at this point, because it does offer players, whether they're players who can't play as often than players like me, or those people that play all the time and this is the only game they play ever. There does bring a little bit of a bridge between all those different types of players, but I do think the implications and the introduction of that have been drastic, to say the least. So we laid out the issues with crafting. Let's talk about solutions I have in mind. And again, these are my personal solutions. I am not at Bungie. I don't see data. I don't know what this will imply to the rest of the player base, stuff like that. We all have different views on how we would address these issues. I did go to school for game design, so I do think I feel very confident on saying some of these solutions, and you guys leave your thoughts on these. But instead of seasonal and raid weapons and the occasional dungeon weapons being craftable, let's make world drop weapons craftable. Yes, it sounds like crazy. Aren't we kind of gatekeeping endgame weapons with RNG stuff? You are right to a degree, but if we throw out a recent raid or any raid chart here on screen, you see that encounters do have set drops, so it doesn't make it near impossible like it did before in D1, or at least in general. There is some sort of drop rate tied to encounters or tied to specific parts of dungeons, that it does make sense that we're in the area where we don't need all these endgame weapons being craftable. Hey, I would even sacrifice to say that, hey, make 2 weapons out of these 6 weapons craftable. I don't care. That's fine. Just don't make them all craftable, because you are causing harm to these endgame activities, which I think is really bad. And world drop weapons, if they are craftable and you kind of switch the dynamic of what weapons are craftable, so now it's world drop instead of those endgame and seasonal weapons, you do make world drop weapons a little bit more viable and desired. And in order to get those type of weapons, you got to play many different parts of the game, and a lot of it is just completely random. So I do think it helps the open world part of the game, but also kind of saves the kind of activity-based parts of the game, like seasonal activities, raids, or dungeons and stuff like that. But at the same time, you may be saying, why would we want enhanced perks from those weapons that are world drops and not endgame weapons? And yes, you are right, but Bungie has in the past talked about, the solution they have for this, and that's how they want to address Adept Vow of Disciple weapons. I'm actually pretty sure this is in the game. I'm actually not sure. I don't do master raids to kind of, do this in action. But Adept weapons in Vow Disciple were at the detriment of not being craftable. For some reason, they had the harder version of the game and loot not craftable RNG, but the perks are the same and inferior. The only difference is that you can put Adept mods on them instead of the basic mods. So the value was lost because enhanced perks, we all know, do provide more benefits in subtle ways and sometimes drastic ways that they become desired. So how about we just take this system and allow players to enhance perks on RNG drops? So let's say you get that brand new submission Vow Disciple SMG. Now, this is craftable, but let's just say hypothetical that it isn't craftable, and you get the god roll you want. Well, you have resources in your crafting where you can take it to the enclave and you can put it into the crafting thing, and you can take your RNG weapon and enhance the perks. It's already in the game in a degree, or at least something that Bungie has thought about when it comes to giving the opportunity to enhance Adept weapons perks. Like, it's there. Let's do that, and that would kind of bring some sort of balance between, crafting becoming too much and kind of giving a cap for players versus allowing players who want to have these weapons in a pinnacle state that got the god roll, enhance them. Could that cause different issues when it comes to players and, time played and stuff like that? Of course. But I unfortunately think that is a better system than allowing these endgame stuff as the point now to just always being craftable. And that may be elitist to say, you're totally inclined to feel that way, because I do admit it is, but it does bring a better state of the game that maybe is what Bungie needs to do at the moment. On top of that, yes, make world drop weapons craftable, but overall we see the quantity of craftable weapons in the game. How about we reduce that overall quality of craftable weapons? Like it doesn't have to be every single new weapon. We can make it world drop weapons. Leave the new weapons or whatever, reprisal weapons, leave that to RNG, and these world drop weapons, make them craftable. The fact that all these endgame stuff like raid weapons, seasonal weapons, it's a lot, and you're basically just playing to get frames. You get the frames and you're kind of done with the game, and that's not a healthy part of Destiny. That's something that was never the case with D1 and early parts of D2, and now the later half of D2, it's, in my opinion, causing a lot of harm. So let's just reduce the overall quality, to say the least. But yeah, now this video is a long one, and if you guys have stuck around, I definitely appreciate your support and viewership. Altogether, this is a big issue for me. It really is. And I understand when people say, I don't think it's a big issue. I don't think that this is something worthwhile and worth changing. You may be totally right. And different opinions here are certainly valid, because crafting does bring tons of benefits to the player. It makes newer players have a bigger bridge to kind of get near where endgame players are faster, reduce the time, and kind of ease in the fact that, man, they can't do raids every week, or they can't do 3 raids every week, or they can't keep farming the raid because they don't have time like that. I totally get that sentiment, but for the overall state of the game, I do think crafting is causing some issues where tweaking needs to be done. And I'm not saying everything I said here was right, because I certainly don't think everything I said here is right. There is definitely room to improve. But if I was going to give my solutions and my issues to a magical box for Bungie to take, some insight on, that is my submission, and they can do with that information whatever they want. But I'm curious if you guys have reached this point of the video. What are your thoughts on crafting? Are there issues for you? Are there not issues for you? This is a conversation I certainly would love having with you guys. If you guys also enjoyed the video and found this video informative in any way, definitely drop this video a like, helps out the video a ton. And more content like this, whether it's discussions, build videos, god roll videos for Destiny 2, and you guys are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and bell to be notified when I drop content like that. Or if you guys are also inclined to watch me play Rainbow Six Siege, Helldivers 2, or Call of Duty besides Destiny 2, definitely subscribe to check out that stuff as well. But overall, that's pretty much all I have to say on this video. I hope you guys have a good one. ShadowNinja here, and I'm out.